Buenos días a todos. Gracias por venir. Sabéis que nos gusta ser puntuales.
Thank you very much. You know that we want to be punctual and we are starting bang on time so that we can open this session. Well, firstly, I would like to say that we had a minor technical issue. Well, it's not a minor problem. It's a big problem. It's a family problem, our CEO, and that's why he's not here with us today. So the shareholders assembly is going to lose part of its brilliance because it's very difficult to replace our CEO. But this is what life is like, and we will have to forge ahead. But what you will see is that this shareholders meeting, what we're going to be doing is talk about things that are related to a change, but it's not a change towards anything that's new or different, but rather it's a change towards the back to basics. So in other words, what we're going to do, we're going to be the Dominion of the past. Dominion has never changed. Dominion has always been the same, and it's always tried to be the same. But what really happens is that due to issues that have to do with us, like the D for diversity, many times we are in many sectors, we are in many places, and it seems as if we get a little bit lost. But that is definitely not true, because Dominion always has a way of working and has some very clear-cut ideas of what it wants to be, what it wants to be like. So today we're going to be talking about the fact that we're coming back not because we left, but we would like to remind people about what Dominion means and how Dominion operates. And well, this diversification doesn't mean that we are totally and absolutely focused on a way of getting things done. So that is the issue that we believe is tremendously important. Okay, so we're going to start off with this general shareholders meeting. We want it to take place quickly and fluently. I'm going to give the floor to the secretary so that he can talk about the terms for this meeting to be called. Good morning, everybody. The Board of Directors of Global Dominion Sociedad Anónima, in its meeting held on March the 22nd of 2023, agreed to call an ordinary General Assembly to be held at 12:30 on April the 26th of 2023 in its first call, and if not, on the following day at the same time in a second call in Bilbao at the Hotel Mercur Bilbao in Calle San Vicente number 6. And the announcement was published on March the 24th of 2023 in the El País newspaper, in the corporate website, and in the corporate website of the Stock Exchange Commission. And as regards to the people that are performing as secretary and chairperson, we also form part of the board according to what is established in the bylaws and in the regulations of the General Assembly. But I would like to say that we have a capital stock of 18.3 million euros, which is divided into 152,666,688 shares of 125 cents euros of a nominal value each, and all of them represent a single class. Both the ordinary ones are represented by annotations in the accounts, and all of them are fully subscribed and fully paid out. So we've counted the number of cards, and it seems that it's 64 shareholders that are physically present in this room, because they are either present in the room right now or because they've exercised their remote rights, their voting rights. And these 64 shareholders represent over 75 million shares, which accounts for 46.48% of the share capital. As represented shareholders, we have 112 that represent over 27 million shares, which is 17.2% of the share capital. So therefore, we have present or represented 176 shareholders that hold over 98 million shares, which represent 64.20% of the share capital. So although with the shareholders that have just arrived, later on we'll give you the final count of the shareholders that are present and represented at this AGM, what we can say is that right now we have more than 50% of the share capital present or represented. So that means that we have a minimum quorum as established by Articles 153, 194, and 201 of the Stock Corporation's law, so that this meeting can take place according to the agenda that has been established, and we have a sufficient number of shareholders that own at least 50% of the share capital. So therefore, I propose to the chair of the board and to the chair of this AGM to declare that this has been validly constituted, so that we can move on to the different ports that form part of the agenda. Well, now that we've met the requirements laid down by the law and by the social bylaws, I declare that this AGM has been validly constituted, this AGM of Global Dominion Access. And now we're going to move on to the agenda for the meeting. Well, now that this AGM has been validly constituted, the Shareholders Assembly is meeting up to address the following issues. The first one, an examination and approval of the annual accounts of Global Dominion Sociedad and the annual accounts of its consolidated group of companies, all of them corresponding to the fiscal year 2022. Point number 2, approval of the management actions of the board. Point number 3, approval of the proposal to apply the results applicable to 2022. Point number 4, examination and reporting on the non-financial report of Global Dominion and its subsidiaries corresponding to the fiscal year 2022. Point number 5, approval and distribution of reserves. And point number 6, and as with the authorization of the board meeting, authorization for the board so that it can acquire own shares either directly or through companies in the group as per Articles 146 and 509 of the Stock Capitals Law, and to reduce share capital so that we can achieve an amortization. Point number 7, the appointment of the account auditors of the company. And point number 8, maximum amount of remuneration to be paid to the board members. Point number 9, we will vote on the annual remuneration report for the directors. And point number 10 has to do with the delegation of faculties to implement any agreements adopted, and this AGM will finish with the approval of the minutes. So now the secretary will describe the agreements that are proposed as regards to the items on the agenda of this AGM. Well, the shareholders have had at their disposal the contents of the different items on the agenda and the different issues that have to be published since these advertisements were published that I referred to previously. So likewise, we've also made available to the shareholders the annual report on corporate governance and the report on the remunerations of the directors. So if the shareholders that are present here do not oppose this, we will only refer to the essential aspects and fundamental aspects of these agreements that have already been published, as I said previously. Perhaps later on, if in the Q&A, if you want us to read out the entire agreement, we will do so if requested. Point number 1, it has to do with the examination and approval of the annual accounts of the company, the balance sheet and the P&L account, from an individual and consolidated perspective as regards the fiscal year that closed on December the 31st. And secondly, we have to approve the management actions of the board for 2022. Point number 3, we have to approve the results of 2022. So we have losses of 56,000 euros that are to be attributed to reserves or to the negative results of previous fiscal years. And well, there's also a profit of the consolidated groups of over 35 million euros in the same period of time. Point number 4 proposes the approval of the consolidated financial statement of the company and its group for the 2022 fiscal year. Point number 5 proposes the approval of the distribution of reserves as follows. And the first point under item 5 in the first chapter, we propose that we transfer an amount of 115,000 euros from the accounts of reserves to the accounts of voluntary reserves, totaling 56,920 million euros. In such a manner that the balance of the accounts as regards the negative results of previous fiscal be cancelled, and so that the balance of voluntary reserves be in excess of 23 million euros. And the second heading of this item is that we pay out supplementary dividend totaling 0.0098 gross euros per each share of the company, and the maximum amount to be distributed would be 15,050,000 euros gross if we cover all of the ordinary shares. And this distribution is suggested that be carried out on July the 5th of 2023. And point number 6 is that what we propose is that the board is to agree an authorization so that shares can be purchased as per Articles 146 and 509. And it also proposes that we authorize the board to, should they acquire these own shares, that they acquire reduction of share capital by means of amortization measures. And point number 7 proposes to the AGM that we extend the contract of the account auditors and that we extend the contract for Price Waterhouse and Coopers. And point number 8, and as per section 4 of the remuneration policy for directors that is in force from 2023 to 2025, that was approved at the AGM held in 2022, that there be a fixed maximum yearly allocation to be distributed among the directors, that we distribute 1,100,000 euros. So this policy for the remunerations policy 2023-2025 allows the board to decide when this is to be paid out to the directors and how this is to be done, or how this is to be distributed. Point number 9, well, now we have to carry out a vote on the annual remunerations report of the board of Global Dominion Access as approved by the board meeting on February the 22nd of 2023 with regard to the period of 2022. Finally, point number 10 has to do with the usual point of order, and that is, we're talking about delegating faculties so that the chairman of the board and so that the secretary can submit the agreements that are to be reached in this AGM. And these are all of the points that we had on the agenda. And well, we would now like to receive your approval, if possible, ladies and gentlemen, shareholders. Right, now we're going to be moving on to the management report, but the CEO usually delivers that, but today it's not going to be possible, I'm afraid, and I will try to do this as best as I possibly can. So when we are talking about Dominion, when we're talking about the fiscal year of last year, 2022, the first thing you can think of is resilience, but I wouldn't only focus on resilience. So in other words, what we have demonstrated in 2021 that we were very resilient. But apart from being resilient, I think that we are still growing in a very significant manner. When you look at the past, since we were listed in the stock exchange in 2016, you can see that our level of EBITDA is going to be multiplied by 3. In other words, we're talking about a very significant amount. And this is something that is continuous. And it's also that has many legs. It's very diversified, which means that we have a much more recurrent business, which is one of the most outstanding issues. And not only that, but this diversification means that we can be resilient no matter how many black swans appear. And that is an important issue. But once again, I think that the business model that Dominion has shows that it's properly oriented and that it's in the right place and that we are going very well with it. So that's why from the very beginning we said that we are always going to be talking about our Dominion as usual, the Dominion of the past. And you'll see how in the new strategic plan we're talking about the Dominion of the past. Dominion doesn't change. Another thing is that frameworks change, but Dominion itself does not change. So we're talking about a good year for Dominion. It is a year we've had organic growth totaling 10% and operating margins in double digit and ordinary profits 7%. plus 7%. And these are good figures that we have been accustomed to lately. And I hope that these figures will also be able to be present in future years, because we certainly hope that this will happen. But if we now move on to the financial statement of 2022, here you can see the adjusted business figure, 8%, and EBITDA 16% and 7%. But what you can see that as from this year, we will start to deliver this information in a somewhat different manner, because the adjusted business figure will not make any sense, because the sales of mobile phones that we didn't include at the final figure can now be included, because there's no longer a significant figure, and this doesn't change the company's ratios. And we will tend towards a somewhat different kind of information. But these will be the elements that will appear in the new strategic plan that you know is going to start this year. Let's carry on then. When we talk about Dominion, and when we're talking about this diversified world of ours, what kind of qualitative elements are involved, which are becoming increasingly important? Well, there's one of them that is incredible, because when we talk about sustainability, many times it seems that we all talk about ESG. We're talking about the legal requirement. But at Dominion, this is not a legal requirement. This is our business. At Dominion, the percentage of services that we are providing in sustainability is extremely high. But our idea is that we will achieve sustainability in all of our businesses. There's something that our CEO always says, and that is that sustainability is like long-term profitability, and that is true. And this is something that we can see at Dominion. And then there's a second point as regards fields of action, energy. Energy is another of the subjects. You know that we are facing a major climate change and a major change in the energy model, and there's going to be big investments in renewables. But we are there. We are there because our business model allows us to provide services and allows us to generate a very important value in this world. So this is why energy is growing and growing and growing all the time in what has to do with our customer base. Strength in LATAM and growth in Colombia. Colombia is a very important country. It's a place where we are doing some outstanding things, because we've also come across Colombian businessmen who, from a cultural perspective, are very similar in the way we like to work. So that's why we feel very comfortable in LATAM, and the same applies to Chile, and the same applies to Peru. We've increased the pipeline of renewables by 1 gigawatt, and this is something that we'll see in the strategic plan. But what we want to do, we want to be in those growth sectors in which it is possible for us to generate value, and which we can also generate wealth for our shareholders and employees. In this world, we do have the capability. In other words, we are able to manage things globally, in other words, on a 360-degree basis. And that's what we're trying to do. So this is why perhaps we're one of those strange groups that are raising funding for projects. And we are performing all of these projects physically and from the engineering perspective. And sometimes we keep these projects so that they can form part of our portfolio in the future. So this is a sector. Well, the other day when I was talking to other people about this, I said that this is not a sector where the most important thing is money. Well, there's lots of money in the renewable sector, because all of the funds of the world are investing money. So this is not the limiting factor. The limiting factor has to do with the possibility of implementing projects, and that is where Dominion is. And the final point is the agreement with Repsol. Well, this is a very significant change, because this year, and because of the energy crisis, what we have noticed is that we could not maintain on our balance sheet customers from the energy sector, because we could not provide them with a service that could generate value for these customers. Why? Because the energy madness we've experienced in this last year, with absolutely mad prices, have made people that are completely normal with long-term approaches that they haven't been able to maintain themselves in the sector. So what have we done? Another of the characteristics of Dominion is that we've moved very quickly. And what we have done is look into why, instead of having our customers on our balance sheet, why don't we try to help them with their management actions? Well, this is what we've done with Repsol. We've sent them, we've handed them over the energy customers, and what we are doing is managing those customers, but we no longer have them on our balance sheet. It's a rapid movement that we've carried out. And secondly, we have been pioneers as regards renting. Renting, you know that this has to do with mobile phones, the renting of mobile phones. This is one of our commercial successes in our network. And this is another of the points that I think that this year, it's something that we had to point it out very clearly, because even in the case of professionals that have been working for many years in this sector, we've received some very significant praise because of how renting has developed. Okay, well, let's talk about now two operations according to the Dominion style. One of them is that now we are the majority shareholders in the world of renewables. We were developing these projects with a number of partners. We held a minority of shares, but we had the possibility of becoming the majority shareholders, which is what we have done. And this is what has changed the balance sheet at the end of the year. But why did we do this? Well, we did it because we wanted people to see the capital gains that were hidden in all of these operations, because we had certain market approaches or capital gains, and we wanted the market to become familiar with them. And what we have done is we've consolidated, and now we have a majority of shares, and this is what has changed our balance sheet. But how has it changed? We've included lots of assets that have a number of debts that are very specific with regard to that asset. And this is why our net financial debt has changed. Because it's not that anything fundamental is changing in our group, certainly not, because we still have a net financial debt that is negative. In other words, we do have cash, but we do have these infrastructural projects that are producing or generating this debt. This doesn't change many things from a financial perspective, because when you look at the figures, you possibly think, well, these people are including a significant amount of debt in the balance sheet, but we don't see it that way. And why? Well, firstly, because the financial debt that is outside those assets is still negative, and we are still within the cash limits. And secondly, our assets, we believe that these are assets that are going to be in our balance sheet on a temporary basis. So we do not want to become an IPP. And that is why this allows us to be able to associate ourselves with all of those people that are setting up an IPP from an industrial perspective, which is an important, very important thing. So that means that we don't only have to be working with private equity partners or with temporary investors, but we could also associate with long-term people, which I believe is a very interesting issue. But please bear in mind, so that you can understand what I'm talking about, we nearly think, well, our CEO says that this is like your little piggy bank, the little piggy bank where you put all your money away, because that's how we see things. Because whenever we need to buy a bicycle, we'll smash the piggy bank, and we will continue with our liquidity, because we want to continue in the world of liquidity. And this is a very important issue. Why? Well, because in our business, we said that we were going back to basics. We are going back to Dominion. We're going back to the Dominion that we had in the past, the Dominion that provides solutions and services, with another word added on, which is not ESG. It's economic reality that is sustainable. In other words, sustainable services or sustainable solutions and services. It's the usual Dominion, the Dominion that has allowed us to multiply EBITDA by 3 since we were listed in 2016, and it's going to allow us to multiply this EBITDA in the future. So you can even see that when I'm talking about this debt, if we were to compare it with EBITDA, it would be within the parameters of the strategic plan, because we were talking about 2x the net EBITDA debt. So it would be just over one point something, but doesn't interrupt anything. But we don't want that wide. When we, in the strategic plan, when we use the multiple of 2, we included that in order to be fully hedged in the case of major sale and purchase operations in M&A. But the M&A of the group is being done in a different manner. It's being done with minor operations, and the important thing basically has to do with the manager of that minor operation who joins the group, and that is the kind of growth we are achieving. It's a type of growth. It's not major operations, and it doesn't seem that big things are happening, but it certainly is a kind of growth that over time accumulates, and it's very important for the growth of the group. Right, let's carry on then. But what are the landmarks? What landmarks did we have, or the highlights in 2022 sustainability? Okay, well, we said that this for us is a business, but not only that, but we also have to meet a number of landmarks, and in practically all of the landmarks of ESG, we've improved. We've improved very significantly too. But we're not doing so just because of this, but we're doing this because this is our business strategy. Remuneration to the shareholder. What we are proposing here is a dividend regarding our ordinary results, regarding what we consider to be ordinary, because we had a number of non-ordinary elements that were changing the final part of the account. But we didn't want to change the growth of our dividend. So this is why this year the dividend is growing 13%. So 1/3 of the ordinary profits is what we're going to be paying out, and we're going to continue with this growth. And we want dividends to grow all the time, and we want our shareholders to collect them. And the only problem we had with dividends in 2021, well, due to reasons connected to COVID, of course. But if we look at the evolution of the accounts since 2016, we're talking about profitable growth. But as regards the future, well, we are now facing the new strategic plan. The new strategic plan is, well, ended in December 2023. But what we said is, okay, no, let's stop. We're going to change the strategic plan because there have been a number of macro changes in the market, and what they have made us get going with this. So what we asking ourselves is, why are we changing the strategic? Well, because this one has already been done. This is already done and dusted. So we have a lot of visibility as regards complying with the plan. So we don't have to explain anything else about it. But what we have seen, we've seen a number of changes that we were making, which are basically two. It's not two major issues, but they are important. One of them has to do with the change of our policy in whatever has to do with energy and whatever has to do with the commercializing unit. And we've moved on to what we say now. What we're saying is that we manage our customers. So a B2C becomes a B2B because your customer in this case is Repsol, or in other cases we have MásMóvil, or we have whoever, and we provide them with a commercial service. But then we also had this second issue, and that is that we wanted our shareholders to be able to see all of the hidden capital gains of the balance sheet, that they be more visible. In other words, not hide them away when we know, yes, that the board knows about them, but really, if we do have the capital gains, they have to be seen, they have to be visible. And this is the concept that I mentioned before on how we're going to be looking into the issue of renewables of the future. So what we're going to see is what we have in terms of renewables, what percentage we have, and what value this represents, so that people can get to know this better, because many times it's surprising to see that you perform operations with partners or partial operations with certain partners in these areas, and you can see the values involved in the operations are very high, but the share does not reflect that, because one works out the figures and you do all the calculations. You say, if I've sold this for X, it's worth Y. But we have not yet been able to transfer this to the share price. So the first thing we thought is, well, let's set up a policy in which this is visible so that the shareholders can see what assets we have. And let's remove that part which until now was somewhat hidden in terms of growth. Let's continue. And then there's something else. There's another issue, a third point that has to do with making things simple, simplicity, which is what we said at the beginning. We are going back to basics. In other words, we deliver solutions and services. And now we have to use this mandatory word. We have to say that we are sustainable. But we are going back to the usual things. 1923, which is the plan that we have carried out until 2019, 2023. Well, we had COVID in 2020, then Ukraine came along. Well, absolutely marvelous. So it's been a constant sum of things. But we are still here, we are alive and kicking, we are growing, and in spite of all of these issues, we are achieving what I said before. In other words, that we were going to multiply by 3 the EBITDA of 2016. But what did we base ourselves on in this plan? Well, let's see what we were using as a basis, and let's see what we have done well, what we have done incorrectly, more or less. What I would say is that practically we've done practically everything except for one of the things, and that is that in the B2C, the framework has changed. And as the framework changed, we had to change very quickly too. But practically everything else, things that have to do the value chain, etc., these are all very generic phrases, if you want. But each and every one of them, and in each of the areas, what they're doing is making a change, or changes are being made in this company. But I would really focus, in terms of diversification, I'd focus on geographic issues. Or geographically speaking, we can see that Germany is now the second country in certain areas of the company. And this is a big change, because what it means, in essence, is that with our management tools, we are now moving into the telco world of Germany, which is very good indeed. And then in the world of digitization, we were applying digital tools, and what we wanted to do is reach out to all of the activities of the group, which is something that we are also achieving. And in relation to organization, there's something wonderful here, and that is that this is an organization that, well, every year we're asking for a tremendous increase in the levels of productivity, and the fixed expenses of this company have not grown. What does grow is the turnover, what does grow is EBITDA, and everything else grows, but not the fixed expenses. What does that mean? What it means, essentially, is that these people in our headquarters are increasing productivity every year, and that's the important issue. Because now we have ratios that are nearly close to 2.4, and that is the important thing. And well, these people, thanks to their productivity, they're giving us another 2 points to the financial statement. But above all, we are becoming a different company when compared to others, and that's the significant thing. Well, you can see the central structure 2.4 capex control, that is under control too, that has been complied with. And it's very important because these are the cultures that are defended by this company, controlling investments. It's very easy to make EBITDA by spending capex, but the issue is doing that without spending capex. And that's something where that's what we have to do. And the net financial debt, even with the current change, we are below 2. And then the M&A, what I said previously, sometimes these are small operations that are very diversified. And then finally, we have the dividends policy, which we are consolidating. So we are going to be focused on the dividend, giving 1/3. And somebody said that a technological firm shouldn't pay a dividend. I never understood that. I think that a technological firm should pay out a bigger dividend than a non-technological one. Let's continue. So I think all of this issue of monies, figures, well, it's here, and there's no need to explain much more than what we have. But I would just like to focus on something that is very cherished in this company and at some other places, and it's the RONA. For us, the RONAs are very important because a RONA, I would like to mention this, it is the profitability of your net assets. And there's nothing hidden here. There's no leverage and there's nothing there. It's the profitability of your net assets. Having this above 20% is marvelous. And what it's telling you is that you have a wonderful future ahead of you because everything depends on RONA. We are very RONA focused, and this is why fulfilling this we think is one of the most important things. And of course, cash flow generation, etc., which is equally important, of course. But we're not going to be talking about that a lot because this forms part of the culture that we've always seen that this company has. The new conceptualization of the company, what a terrible word. Let's look into this now. All of this business of a new conceptualization, this is the AGM, and tomorrow we'll be presenting the strategic plan in Madrid. So let's look into this, and these are somewhat busy dates. Well, the first thing that has to be said about this new concept is simplification, because what we find is most difficult is to explain to people that what we do is very simple. In other words, that what we are doing is very straightforward. And I don't know, repairing the Nou Camp football stadium, or refurbishing it rather, or setting up a transmission network in Angola. Well, the important thing is how you do that work. So we are a solution and a service, a sustainable service, and this is what we are. And we're just that, and nothing else. And it's pretty straightforward. Recurrence. Well, this is a factor that has to do with the former dominion, where we had lots of operations that could move around, that could have volatility compared to the current dominion. At the current dominion, we have a very powerful service base. And we have a portfolio of extremely powerful solutions too. And we could think that we had a very significant recurrence base. But what we believe is that right now, it's very, very difficult for somebody to topple us over. In other words, to get a black swan coming along and harming you. And we're only going to have a profitable growth. And the concept of recurrence in our operations is one of the issues that is one of the most important ones regarding the changes that Dominion has undergone. And then I'd have to repeat sustainability once again. This is the area in which we are growing, and this is also one of the issues in which we have a major ambition, because we want to become a sustainable provider of industrial services in this company. Let's continue. Well, you can see that we, in the past, in our speeches, we were always saying, well, let's help people be efficient. And you've heard our CEO say it many times, okay, let's make companies more efficient by providing them with a service, or let's give them a solution. But we no longer say that. Now we're talking about efficient and sustainable, but we also believe that sustainable is only long-term efficiency. So these are the two concepts that we are addressing. This doesn't represent a major change, but it's all about noticing that sustainability is going to help us. But what world are we going to live? We're going to live in a world that is undergoing an energy transition. Well, I think there's no reason to talk about this because everybody knows that what is coming along is the energy transition, so we don't have to say very much. And then we have the industrial transition. This is a world, well, they're always talking about robotics and about digitization and 5.0, 4.0. I don't know how many point zeros we're talking about, but it's clear that this is something that we have on our table. But with something that has become increasingly important in our industry, which is sustainability, because the environment is going to be a limiting element, and it doesn't only depend on a political legislation. No, we'd really be talking about something that is purely physical and real, and that is that the environment is going to limit you. And this is one of the issues, and this is why we say that long-term efficiency can only arise from sustainability, and then digital transition. We're working on this. We've always moved or felt very comfortable with this item, and we will continue with it in the future. So, of course, we are in the three transitions, and of course, we are going to get this done because this company has been born for this particular purpose. And what is going on, what is happening is that more and more frequently this issue of services is growing. And what is also happening is that we are doing lots of work in services of the future, things connected to maintenance and so on and so forth. And that's a very important thing because when we are working at hospitals, for instance, it's not only the first investment, the main investment of the hospital that is technology, but it also has to do with future maintenance actions. So that's why we believe that all of these transitions that are coming along, what they are doing is multiplying the market. They are also multiplying the geographies. They're multiplying everything. So we have no problem of looking around for work. No, our constraints are going to be focused on our human resources, on our well-trained people. That's where we're going to have a problem because in all of those spheres in which we operate, these are worlds where there's a tremendous amount of growth taking place. As far as simplification is concerned, but I'm not going to say much more about this because I don't want to bore you or anything like that. And we're going to move on to guidance in terms of the strategic commitment. Since we were listed on the stock exchange, we've improved all of our figures. However, our stock exchange improvement has not been equally brilliant. So we are under the impression that we didn't know how to explain this, that we told the story incorrectly, that we didn't know how to explain anything. But the truth is that, look, in the few years, well, we had COVID and then we had those many other horrible things that have happened in recent years. And everything is about multiplying by 2 or by 2.5 or by whatever. And we, this year, in the year 2023, we'd be talking about multiplying by 3, which is where we stand currently. Well, we believe that we have a forecast. We have a forecast for the work to be done in the future in those sectors we're present that is extremely positive. We have growth opportunities, major growth opportunities. We don't think that we have any constraints. We think that we are doing things well as regards cash control, as regards controlling investments, and practically everything. Because when we look into ourselves to see where things are going wrong or where we are making mistakes, but the only thing we have to do is do something about communicating things to the market so the market understand what we're doing. And what is most important is that they understand the future we'll be heading towards. Because with this way of working, in those sectors in which we are already operating and knowing that we are going to be fundamental actors in these transitions that I already mentioned, the three transitions that I mentioned previously that mankind is going to undergo or is going to undergo and enjoy because, well, that's enough. No more suffering because each transition is going to produce an increase in wealth for mankind. And we are going to be actors in this process. And this is what Dominion has to explain to society, to its investors, and to everybody else. In other words, something that employees are familiar with, and they're very enthusiastic about this. And perhaps what we have to do is tell other stakeholders about this so that they can carry this out. That's all. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to the definitive quorum of shareholders and share capital present at this AGM before we move on to the Q&A for the shareholders as established by Article 197. So we have at this point in time as shareholders present in the room, as well as those that have exercised their right to participate in this AGM via remote communication systems, 78 people, 78 shareholders, representing 73,122,684 shares, which is 47.90% of the share capital. And the representative shareholders, we have 122, which is 27,072,382 shares, which is 17.73 of the share capital. So therefore, we have either present or represented 200 shareholders that are holders of over 19 million shares, which represent 65.63% of the share capital. And therefore, it so happens that, as pointed out previously, we have at this AGM either present or represented shareholders that exceed 50% of the share capital. Well, before we move on to the questions of the shareholders, I would like to ask the Secretary to give us the quorum of shareholders and the amount of capital that is present at the AGM, as I just pointed out. According to the articles of the Stock Corporation Law, there's a quorum that is in excess of 50% of the share capital. So that means that this AGM is perfectly valid or totally valid. So if any of the shareholders wishes to take the floor now, as established in Article 197 of the Stock Corporations Law regarding the issues listed on the agenda, well, now we're going to open the Q&A session for anybody that wants to speak. Any interventions, any comments, or any questions, please, or any doubts from anybody? No, we never get any questions. Okay, well, I would now like to ask the Secretary to subject these agreements to the approval of the AGM. Well, as from this moment, we're going to move on to the voting process. We're going to be voting on each one of the items that form part of the agenda of the AGM that we've already referred to previously at the beginning of this AGM. The detail of votes against and abstention, to the extent that we can compile these votes that are cast via correspondence, well, this information can be checked out and will be made available to all the shareholders on the website, as well as on the website of the company and of the Stock Exchange Commission. And this will be done this afternoon. Right, so let's move on to voting on the different points. Point number 1 refers to the examination and approval of the annual accounts of Global Dominion, as well as of the annual accounts of its consolidated group, corresponding to the 2022 fiscal year. Is this approved? Yes, carried. And as I say, it's approved with a percentage of votes in favor of 99.6%. Item number 2, we're going to be voting on the approval of the management actions of the board. Is this approved? Approved, carried. This is approved by 98.17% of the share capital. Point number 3, we have to approve the application of the results of 2022. Approved? Approved. So this is unanimously approved too. Point number 4 refers to the examination and approval of the non-financial statement of Global Dominion Sociedad Anónima and its subsidiaries corresponding to the year 2022. Is this approved? Approved. Also approved unanimously. Point number 5, approval of the distribution of reserves. Is this approved? Approved. Also unanimously approved. Number 6, regardless of the authorization of May the 22nd, we would now like to authorize the board so that they can proceed to purchase own shares directly or through other companies of the group as established in Articles 146 and 509 of the Stock Corporations Law, so that we can authorize the board so that they can agree to a reduction of the share capital by amortizing the own shares. Is this approved? Approved. Well, this is approved by 99.81%. Point number 7, extending the mandate of the account auditors of the company and of its consolidated group for this fiscal year to be closed on December the 31st, 2023. Approved. Approved by the percentage is 99.93%. Point number 8, establishing the maximum amount of the remuneration of the directors for the current fiscal year. Approved? Approved. It's approved by 99.60% of the votes in favor. Point number 9, the approval, it's a consultative issue, the annual report on remunerations of directors for 2022. Approved? Yes, approved. It's approved with a consultative on a consultative basis by 96.8% of share capital. And point number 10, delegation of faculties, so that these agreements could be implemented. Agreed. Agreed also by unanimously. So therefore, we have approved all of the agreements that have to do with the items on the agenda of this meeting. And to finish, we now propose that we approve the minutes that have been drafted during this session. And I would also like to propose, unless the shareholders wish otherwise, that we consider it be read and that we approve it. Is the other minutes approved? The minutes of the session are approved. Therefore, we also approve the minutes of the AGM. And as there are no further issues to discuss, we adjourn the session. Thank you very much.